7:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome on into Nashville's Morning News, along with Ken Weaver, Johnny B. Dan Mandis here. Want to welcome on into the program Jonathan Fahey. And, of course, Jonathan has been helping us, figure out this whole hush money case, this hush money trial that is going on with former President Donald Trump. And, some incredible moments yesterday, Jonathan, during the trial. Couple of things happened. Number one, and this is the big one making the news today, a couple of things happened. But number one is Michael Cohen admits that he actually stole something like, $30,000 from Donald Trump's corporation?
Yeah, exactly. Wasn't this stunning when you think about all the bad things that have already come out about Michael Cohen? The repeated lying, his bias against Trump, his bias in favor of, how this will help him by doing Trump in. But before all this came up, he was deceiving Donald Trump. He was going behind his back. He's stealing from the company, biting the hand that feeds him, which is really one of the most disgusting types of behaviors for anyone. And it's almost like you can't believe how bad this case is for the government and how bad this witness is. There's nothing about, it's almost like, what will be, if they put him on for another day, what would come out then? It's hard to believe, but it's just every day is something worse for the government that just reconfirms what we've all been talking about, that this case should have never been brought. It's so outrageous that this is taking the time of, even though they're New York City residents that hate Donald Trump, this should not be taking place in a New York City courtroom. There's so many things that are far more important to the citizens of New York, including their safety, that seems to get ignored by this DA. But that seemed to be the big takeaway was that, plus he admitted he has a financial interest, like he stands to gain financially if Donald Trump is convicted. Mm-hmm. And then the second part of it, which you probably were going to get to, was when Donald Trump has now, the defense is presenting a case which had some, I seem to be some fireworks as well.
Yeah, you're talking about Robert Costello, and I wanted to, because you're an attorney, of course, and you're former director of ICE, and so you've got obviously a lot of experience in the courtroom. So I want your take on this. So as we have pointed out, and I've pointed out in many monologues now, Robert Costello is Michael Cohen's former attorney. And he knows where all the bones are buried as it relates to Michael Cohen. He had all of this, as we know, exculpatory evidence that could actually help Donald Trump's case, but Alvin Bragg refused to submit that to the grand jury. So Costello then went on Fox News. He testified in front of Congress, basically saying that Michael Cohen right now is lying on the stand. And so the question, I think last time we spoke, Jonathan, should the defense put Robert Costello on the stand? To be honest, I don't remember what you said, but the defense ultimately did. But it turned into a train wreck because as the defense was asking Costello all kinds of questions, the prosecution kept objecting and Judge Merchan kept sustaining the objection. Talk to me. That happened over and over and over again. Talk to me about what's going on there. What's the dynamic?
Well, it seems to be, a couple of things are kind of interesting. Again, this is from, second, third-hand, accounts. But one, it seemed like when Stormy Daniels was on the stand for the government, she had free reign to kind of talk about whatever she wanted and got into some, kind of crazy and irrelevant areas. And then when Robert Costello got on the stand, everything seemed to be tight and reined in. And I think, one thing that seemed to happen, there was this drama between Costello and the judge that he was making, I think, audible and reactions to some of the rulings which offended the judge, causing him to clear the courtroom. And, one thing that is a concern for the defense is, that's always a gamble. You put somebody on and their other bad stuff could come out, because I think the trial's gone extremely well for Donald Trump. But, it's certainly not a good dynamic when you have a witness that's fighting with the judge, because presumably this jury has been in, they've been in court with this judge, obviously, for however long, weeks and weeks, and they might have some sort of affinity for the judge in the process. So I think that might have been, a little bit concerning, but I think the substance of what he has to say is so damning to the government's case. Basically, I think the core of it is, hey, I was representing or working with this guy, and he didn't say any of this stuff to me, and it would have been very helpful when I was representing him because it would have helped get him out of these charges or reduce the charges or something else. So if he had anything bad about Donald Trump to say, he certainly would have been the strongest position to say it when he represented him. And I think substantively that just, again, is another, I would say, nail in the coffin, but I'm not confident Donald Trump gets acquitted because of the New York jury and the judge, I think, is very biased. But, it's just another nail in the coffin, at least figuratively for how bad this case is. Again, it should never have been brought. It just seems so bad on multiple levels.
Former federal prosecutor Jonathan Fahey is joining us, also former director of ICE, and kind of breaking down the hush money trial with Donald Trump. And, when you look at Michael Cohen, you look at Stormy Daniels, I had mentioned earlier that if you're a Trump supporter, you should send a thank you card to Alvin Bragg for the people that they're using to try to take down Donald Trump, because it's like playing whack-a-mole, but it's a really easy game because these two witnesses, Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, they just have no credibility. But you bring up a great point, which is all that may be true, but this New York jury with this biased judge, in your gut, and maybe if you're speaking to other legal professionals, what do you think is going to happen with this jury?
I don't know. I feel like that's one of these things that I'm totally guessing. I think, I want to believe in the system, and I've done lots of jury trials, and generally juries get to what, at the end of it, whatever, win or lose, you do feel like they generally get to the right place, and their verdicts make sense. So here, the only thing that really makes sense is acquitting Donald Trump of all the charges. So that's why I think, if I believe in the system, that's what should happen, because this case, it really is, it's laughable. And to think, you've, I'm sure, covered lots of cases in your day. Has there ever been a criminal case that is just such a complete joke? And to think that this is against the president of the United States, I've never even heard of anything similar, in terms of the quality of the witnesses, the seriousness of the allegations, meaning being completely unserious, taking up so much time of the community to present this. If you take out Donald Trump out of the equation, no one would even believe that this type of thing is in a courtroom anywhere in the United States.
Jonathan Fahey is joining us. Jonathan, I want to ask you about this moment during the presidential campaign stop for Donald Trump.
And I'm going to demand a drug test too, by the way. I am. No, I really am. I don't want him coming in like the State of the Union. He was high as a kite. I said, "Is that Joe up there? A beautiful robe?" And by the end of the evening, he's like, "Well," he was exhausted, right? No, we're going to demand a drug test. But fake Tapper and these people, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fair. I think they.
All right, so that is former President Donald Trump, campaign stop, demanding for a drug test of Joe Biden. And your thoughts, to me, if I'm Biden's handlers who don't want him to debate clearly, is this a moment where they say to Biden, this is where we can get out of this thing? We can just say that Trump is making a mockery of the whole thing, and we're just going to take a step back.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that they probably really are looking for some sort of off-ramp. They couldn't affirmatively get out there and say, we don't want to debate Donald Trump, but now they can say something akin to what you're saying. But it's also funny that Donald Trump just always, whether or not people, like him or not, he always, goes for the heart, goes for the jugular on this. And it's quite funny because it makes the Biden people very uncomfortable, because they know that State of the Union speech was at very least quite bizarre and out of character from the way Biden normally speaks. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. And I think when you brought this up, I think it was last week when I think the news just broke, it was like it kind of didn't make sense that he would all of a sudden want to debate, other than, which I'm sure you've talked about, they must have horrible internal polls that show he's getting crushed and needs to get out of it. And it's also probably, there's people in the DNC that are thinking, this gives us the off-ramp. If he totally bombs, they can go to him and try to maybe go to Jill Biden and try to talk him out of running again and have a chance of installing somebody else. Because, if you saw, I don't know if you saw these speeches over the weekend, the Detroit speech and the college speech. I mean, he's really a disaster, even with prepared remarks. He thought he was vice president during the pandemic and things like that. It's unbelievable. That's not just like a minor slip up. He's concocting this whole version of doing something during the pandemic on behalf of Barack Obama in Michigan, and that just shows he's just completely out there. And then the other thing, that speech at Morehouse State was quite striking, which I think shows, which I'm sure everyone sees this one coming. They feel like they're losing the minority vote, so they're going to go hard on racial division.
Oh, yeah.
Look for opportunities to divide the country on race. I mean, for an 81-year-old president, he should be trying to unite the country, and it's just a cynical division. And that speech was one of the most really dark, cynical, disgraceful speeches for a college commencement. It should be an uplifting speech, maybe congratulate the graduates, their families, but instead it's simply politics in the dirtiest, lowest form of trying to divide people on race, cause racial tension, and there's nothing about that he could possibly argue is good for the country.
No, I mean, clearly it was a campaign speech, and there were so many things that he said which bothered me, but this is the one that I think really stood out among the others.
They don't see you in the future of America, but they're wrong. To me, we make history, not erase it. We know black history is American history.
So Republicans don't see black folks in the future of America. I mean, I don't even know how someone would come to that kind of a conclusion, because clearly that's not the case. And it's my hope that not only, of course, the graduates at Morehouse College, but also, black voters across the country understand that Joe Biden is just pulling these sound bites from, it sounds like 40 or 50 years ago this speech could have been made.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's like they want to make slavery an issue in this campaign.
Yeah.
It's just so it's so absurd. But what's interesting, when you compare Donald Trump to Joe Biden, how Donald Trump never goes after the Democrat voters in terms of criticizing them, but Joe Biden basically says half the country are racist, MAGA Republicans, things like that. Donald Trump goes to the other side and says, vote for me, here's why, and you were better off when I was president, I'll make you better off again. It's truly a different, type of message, and it's really amazing to me. If I was Biden's handlers, I would say give an uplifting speech, talk about the future, talk about how great things are. People want a leader that's optimistic, that sees a bright future, not this cynical, dark, and maybe it works for them on elections. I'm sure it has before, and I think it helped them in 2020, just these racial divisions, the riots that they inflamed as much as they could. But it's just so awful. He has an opportunity, and you think, again, at his age, and again, I think he presented himself as a uniting figure, meaning Biden did, and all he does is personally attack not just his opponents, but his opponents' voters, which, even if he somehow were able to win that way, it's not a great way to win, and it doesn't unite the country in any respect.
No, I mean, one of his favorite lines has always been, "I'm a president for all Americans." Clearly not. And that's part of the dynamic of Joe Biden and, quite frankly, the Democrat Party, is that this is what they always devolve into. Now, and very briefly, do you think there's any chance that the Democrat Party does something to try and remove him from the ticket?
I think there's a chance. I mean, a few months ago, I thought it was enormous that they would try to get rid of him, the chance. But it seems like Biden is stubbornly hanging on, and then they have the Kamala Harris issue, which they don't know how to leapfrog her in a graceful way without offending so many people. So they have this trick bag, but I still think there's a chance. But again, I don't know how they do it, but I think maybe this debate is a good way to get somebody in the room with him after he bombs it. And I don't think, even if he can get through the debate, I'm sure it will be a complete disaster. But I don't know how big the chance is. I mean, I would put it, maybe 25%, but I know a lot of people within the Democratic Party are looking at this, and it's just a looming catastrophe if they keep him on the ballot. And can anyone actually see him serving 4 more years? I don't think anyone can. So that means Kamala Harris, who even this White House has reduced to basically a ceremonial role as vice president, would be the president of the United States in, I would argue quite serious times. So, it's just such a complicated situation, but I'm sure lots of people and the smart people want to get rid of him, and they just can't figure out how.
It's only a matter of time. We'll have to see what happens. Yes or no. If you are working with Donald Trump and he is demanding this drug test, Biden says, no, I'm not going to take this drug test. Do you debate anyway? Do you draw a line in the sand, or what do you do if you're Donald Trump's campaign manager?
I think you debate him anyway. You wipe the floor with them and then make fun of them for being afraid to take the drug test. And I think that's the move. Donald Trump, I think, when he's on offense, he's good. And, I think he has a great case to make. If you just look at issue by issue, I think, it's a very easy call for the voters. And I think every opportunity he has to draw the contrast is helpful to him.